What's up, everybody? I am your host, a serial killer trapped in a doll's body with a love for murder and a bad attitude. And that is my co-host, an 8-year-old trauma victim who can't catch a break.
The host with the most.
And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we are going to talk about one of my favorite films and one of the best sequels to ever exist. On this week's episode, we are talking about John Lafia's Child's Play 2. Fuck the name up right off the bat. So we covered the original last year, and I remember talking about how much I loved this movie. Honestly, I really like the first three. I know Child's Play 3 gets shit on a lot, but at least to me, it has a special place in my heart. I like it. But yeah, 2's definitely my favorite.
Yeah, we were just actually talking about this a couple of days ago, and I had never really realized that 3 got hated on so much. I don't understand it. I put it right in there with the first 2. It has the same feel that the first 2 had, and people complain when the third one came out that it was just all the same stuff and it was old. But that's what people want from a movie.
I'm perfectly fine with that.
And then, now look what it's turned into because it's been changed.
Yeah.
We went from this Child's Play Chucky to what we have now on the TV show, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And now the fans are wanting, well, a lot of the fans want the old shit back. Yeah, I don't understand that either. But yeah, two's right in the middle of them. Iconic fucking scary Chucky.
Yeah, definitely. I remember watching this a lot when I was a kid. One of us, I don't remember which one of us, but one of us had this on VHS. I think it might have been our cousin that had it. But yeah, we burnt that thing up. Fucking love this movie. One thing about it is in the first one, we don't see a lot of Chucky until the showdown at the end, right? And that works really, really well for the first movie. Because I remember when we did the other episode, we were talking about how the first movie, if you went in to see this movie for the first time, for at least half of it, you would kind of question, is this Andy doing this? Because you don't ever really see Chucky doing stuff until later on in the movie.
You would also wonder what it looked like.
Yeah.
Like that unmasking the killer. What does that look like?
But this one really delivers on showing us a ton of Chucky without showing us too much or making it just kind of oversaturating the character and just adding too much. And then we also get a lot more of Chucky's personality in this movie compared to the first one. But he still has those scary rage moments.
He is scary the whole time. We start getting leaks of the comedy stuff, but it's not obvious ridiculous comedy. It's scary. He's scary.
He's still scary.
One thing that really sets this movie apart from the first one for me is obviously they had a bigger budget. Chucky looks awesome.
He does.
The puppeteers for every part of his face, every muscle that you would have in your face, you had people controlling them. It would take 8 to 10 guys just working on the puppet as it was running. And they really, really, even for the time, going back and watching it now, Chucky looks so scary because his facial expressions and stuff are so real. Whereas they did a great job in the first one, but they didn't have as much to work with. Kevin Yeager came in the puppet team, and they absolutely fucking kill it. And he's great in this one. Another thing that I really like about this movie is that we get a realistic look at what would have happened after the first movie.
Yeah.
There wasn't a happily ever after. The what you would expect would happen. His mom takes his side, ends up in a mental facility, and now we go from the struggles of a single mom trying to get by and this her son that's going through this to now it's even worse. Now his mom is gone. He can't even see her and he's in a foster home. And, I know a lot of people wanted his mom to be in the second one or was upset that she wasn't. But I think it was a really, really smart direction to send it because it's very realistic.
This is an amazing sequel, an amazing continuation of a story that seemed like it had a conclusion at the end of the first one. Because, that happens a lot where you get a movie that's a really good story in that, hour and a half or so. But then when it's successful and then you got to bring a sequel in, you've already completed the story. So now you have to add on to the story and it just doesn't flow like it should. This movie doesn't have that problem. And, I know we've talked about it many times before. I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but Bride is an amazing movie, but it really started the beginning of comedian Chucky and not scary Chucky.
Yeah.
And that is one thing I love about 1, 2, and 3 is we get scary Chucky.
I think Bride of Chucky is really awesome because of Ronnie Yu, who directed that. Same guy who went on to do Freddy vs. Jason, who was not a horror director
No,
when he came in, but his style of filming, and he has that blue,
blacks and blues, yeah, color palette.
yeah, he's got that blue just tone over everything for the time that movie came out. Like the music and soundtrack went with it really well. It was completely different from prior movies with an actual score, but it had a really cool feel and the cinematography was really good. Chucky looked awesome. But outside of that, like as much as that is my favorite movie in the franchise because it is the one that had the most impact on me as a kid, I would take this scary ass version of Chucky and put him in that movie, and I think it would be a much better movie.
Yeah, in my opinion, man, this is the perfect blend of scary and funny Chucky. I love this movie. I've been excited to talk about this movie for a long time. I thought about picking it last year when we did the first one. I was like, well, I'll just pick it. My next pick, that'll be my next movie. But I really wanted to stretch it out because I only have really 3 Chucky movies that I was really excited to talk about. But here we are.
Yeah, I'll say 4. I think the first 3 and then Bride of Chucky, I think are all ones I would love to cover. But yeah, part 2, man, it's you see the end of part 1 and you really get the sense that okay, they survived. She's got the main cop, the main detective on her side. He now knows it's real. It's going to be happily ever after. And how many times do we watch movies and say, well, she's gonna be fucked.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
this isn't happily ever after. Now there's a whole cabin of dead kids, and she's the only person that survived, and she's got defensive wounds all over her or offensive wounds all over. Like, she's gonna go to prison. She's never gonna explain her way out. That happens in movies all the time. And this is a really good continuation of seeing what the actual reality.
Let's see. Do we got any other business? Oh, if you want to check out our weekly news show or just help support the show, head on over to our Patreon. It's super cheap, like McDouble in 2016 cheap. But yeah, we do a fun, informative weekly show over there. So if you want to stay up to date on what is going on in the horror world, come hang out over there. We just recorded that episode and we had some really cool releases, stuff that's coming out, some crazy murder for hire story, and some Scream 7, some actually really interesting Scream 7 news. So, yeah, but with that being said, are you ready to jump into Child's Play 2?
I am ready.
All right.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at Grindhouse.Horror.Pod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at GrindhouseSyndicate.Horror.Pod, and many gore. which you can always find links for in the show notes, as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and don't want us to have to fight to the death in a colorful murder factory, give us a review. Child's Play 2 is a 1990 American supernatural slasher film and the direct sequel to Child's Play from 1988. It was written by Don Mancini and directed by John Lafia, one of the co-writers of the first film. It is the second installment in the Child's Play franchise and set 2 years after the original. The plot follows serial killer Charles Lee Ray, who is still trapped in his good guy doll body as he continues his pursuit for Andy Barkley, who was placed in foster care after the events of the first film. It stars Alex Vincent and Brad Dourif, who both reprised their roles from the original, along with Christine Elise, Garrett Graham, and Jenny Agutter, who you may recognize as the hot nurse in American Werewolf in London. At least I did. It was released on November 9th of 1990, which was exactly 2 years after the first film was released. And it grossed $35 million on a budget of just $13 million. Surprised it didn't make more.
Yeah, that was a lot of money for
$35
back
million.
then, though.
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of like $70 million now.
Yeah,
that's
$70
right.
million, pretty good.
Tom Holland, who directed the first Child's Play, declined to return for the sequel, so John Lafia, who was a good friend of producer David Kushner, was asked to direct. Originally, both Catherine Hicks and Chris Sarandon were intended to reprise their roles as Karen and Detective Norris, with the story opening up with a court scene covering the events of the previous film. Unfortunately, though, this idea was scrapped right before production. Special effects supervisor Kevin Yeager returned to do the special effects and puppetry, even directing several scenes of the film himself. Principal photography began on November 6 of 1989 with a $12 million budget. Unlike the first film, which was mostly shot on location in Chicago, most of the second film was shot on Universal Studios in Universal City, California. Production designer Ervo Cristante was hired to design and build the sets, who you may know from working on the film Tremors. He built that whole entire town in like the desert.
Dude can build some sets, man.
Yeah.
This factory set is fucking
Oh,
incredible.
yeah, it is. Because he and Lafia wanted the film to look like it was from a child's perspective, he built the sets very large and colorful, also incorporating filming with wide lenses and low-angled shots mixed with large objects, which honestly was one of the things that drove me nuts about this movie for so long. Like everything just being way too big and way too tall. But now that I understand like why it was done this way, I love this idea.
Man, I've always loved it.
I did not. Like the oversized, like the steps being extremely wide. The ceilings are like some of the ceilings in the bedroom are like almost 20 feet tall. It was just weird.
I never really paid attention to the height of the bedroom ceilings
I
and
did.
stuff. It's more when I say I loved it, the factory, the whole factory, like the last segment of this, the last section of this movie, the final conclusion in the factory is amazing. Like that is the highlight. I know they tried to actually put this in the first movie and had to write it out for budget concerns because it cost them a lot of money. But the massive fucking factory with all the different assembly lines and colors and stuff.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that's what drew me in. That's like the first thing that drew me into a Child's Play movie.
Yeah, no, like they're talking about like the main set, which is the house. So if you go back and you watch and you really pay attention to the set, it doesn't make any sense. Everything is just way too drastically big, and it makes sense when you think of it like, okay, this is how things are to a child, you know, like We've talked about it, like, back in the day when we were, like, little kids and we would, like, play on our parents' bed, like, play wrestling, and it was, like, the size of a ring, right? But now when you look at a bed, you're like, "How the hell did both of us fit on there and wrestle and not
Yeah.
fall off?" And it just makes sense that when you're a kid, everything does seem huge, and that's why they built this set the way they did, and I thought it was genius, man. I had no idea until I researched this movie. So speaking of Chris Tonde, he designed the factory where the final showdown that you were just talking about, where that takes place. He designed that completely from scratch in a soundstage with with fully automated moving parts.
Yeah, so there is I think it's called, I don't wanna fuck this up, but the documentary is called Making Chucky. It might be slightly off, like Creating Chucky or
Yeah.
something, but it's done by the same people who did the Camp Crystal Lake stories
Nice, nice.
and the,
Never Sleep Again.
Never Sleep Again,
Mhm.
which are the best documentaries that you can get on Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. They did one for the Child's Play franchise, and it's actually on Shudder. It came out on Shudder. I've watched almost the whole thing. I quit watching when it got up to the show part, but they talk about this and the amount of boxes that they had to have made
Oh,
just for the
Lord,
maze
yeah.
scene. So the maze scene, they were really big fans of The Shining, Don Mancini, which is why they kinda go through there with the camera and kinda recreate that. But all those boxes had to be brought in, and so many of them had actual dolls in them. And then, the background ones were empty, but the amount of planning that went into building that, and then to find out, like, that the actual conveyor belts and everything were all
Yeah, the robot
moving. Yeah.
arms and all that, yeah.
Yeah, super
That's wild.
impressive, man, and it is by far my favorite scenes of this movie. That the whole end of this movie is what makes this movie for me.
Honestly, this is, like, one of the best showdowns of movies. Like, this
Yeah.
is a great showdown.
Yeah, and this is where really Kevin Yeager gets to shine with the Chuckies. Like, the shit we get to see at the end's fucking awesome. Super, like, legitimately scary as opposed to the funny Chucky we get now. They actually showed a picture of this soundstage that they built this in, the giant building, and it looks weird seeing it not, like, all dressed up to be a
Mhm.
Child's Play factory. But yeah, it was really interesting.
So the film opened at number 1 in the US with an opening weekend gross of 10 million from 1,996 screens in the US. The film grossed a total of 28 million in the US and an additional 7.3 million internationally for a worldwide gross of 35.8 million. Child's Play 2 was first released on VHS in April 11th of 1991. The film was later released on DVD in 1999 and bundled with the fourth film, Bride of Chucky. On October 22nd of 2002, it was released in multiple collections, such as the Chucky collection in 2003. Also, you have Chucky, the Killer DVD collection in 2006, Chucky, the Complete collection in 2013, and finally, Chucky Complete 7 Movie Collection from 2017. Child's Play 2 was released on 4K Ultra HD by Scream Factory on August 16th of 2022. This release included a new 4K scan from the original camera negative, a new Dolby Atmos track, and several interviews recorded in 2022. The film was followed by Child's Play 3 in 1991 and Bride of Chucky in 1998, amongst many, many other movies.
Man, I really, really would like to get my hands on that Scream Factory 4K. I've almost bought it a couple times, but I'm like, no, I already have it. But then when I went back and watched it, I'm like, damn, the best version of this movie I've ever seen is the DVD cuts of it. So I bet you Scream Factory's fucking 4K scan
I think
looks
it'd be
really,
worth it.
really good with the factory scene and the bright colors.
All right, so ratings. Rotten Tom gave it a 47%.
Boo.
IMDb gave it a 6 out of 10. Letterboxd is a little better with a 3.2 out of 5. And the Google average audience rating is a 4.3 out of 5. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it for rent on Amazon Prime, Fandango at Home, Google Play, Apple TV, and our partners YouTube for $3.99. All right, so you ready to dive into the plot?
Let's do it.
So we start out with two things happening at the same time. First, we see a very 90s limo driving through the city of Chicago, and we see the burnt, crispy remains of Chucky, the possessed good guy doll from the last movie, being cleaned up and remodeled at the toy factory. As someone who loves restoring old things, I personally find the cleaning of the Chucky doll very satisfying.
Oh, I put this whole intro as the second most iconic intro in the series behind 3, which takes place in the factory where
Yeah.
this one ends. I love seeing that, and it as a collector of busts, I would love to have Chucky's head, just the burnt version of it with the one eye that we get here.
That's
Like,
awesome.
before he starts, like, working on it. It would be awesome.
So they end up scraping and grinding all of the old melted plastic and damaged parts off, giving it a bunch of brand new replacement parts, including skin, hair, new eyes, and a body. Really, the only thing that they kept from the old one was like the metal skull and the teeth, I think. Everything else is new. So after this, we then see the limo finally reach its destination as it pulls up to the Playpal's toy factory where they make the good guy dolls. And inside this limo is the boss man of this company. And he is a dick with a capital D. So the CEO shows up and he meets with the executive that is in charge of the factory. And this lame fuck's name is Matson. And Matson is, of course, freaking out that this guy's here. And he's like kissing his ass. You know the deal. And we find out here that the events of the first film has made its way into the media, which in turn has made PlayPal toys look pretty bad. We also find out a little bit about what has happened since the last film. It turns out that even though the police were involved in killing Chucky in the last film, they have now completely denied everything, pretty much leaving the Barkleys out to dry. And Andy's mom backed up Andy's story in court, causing her to be deemed crazy and being placed under a psychiatric observation, which in turn caused Andy to become a ward of the state. We also find out here that the company is playing this whole thing off as a rogue worker who messed with the doll's voice box, thinking that it was funny to make the doll say that he was Charles Lee Ray and the Lakeshore Strangler.
No, that is the rumor. And that's why they're doing the quality control report on the doll, because he's like, it's the rumors that are spreading around. People are saying somebody inside the company did this, and they get the doll, and he's like, well, we checked it over, and everything comes back normal, which is, I think, genius. I think that whole thing was genius, because you wonder why they would refurbish this Chucky doll. But it's because they're doing a quality control report because these rumors have gotten out, putting the blame on the company. And they now have this report to say that we got the doll, we analyzed it, there was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, but the company is using the rumor to somewhat of an advantage because he literally says, like, I got good news.
Well,
and it's they can now say that it was just this rogue worker who was just a bad apple. The company is not at fault. It's just this one guy.
I see that different. I think so. He tells him that, and he's like, "Well, what's the good news?" And he's like, "Well, I'm getting to that. We got the original doll. We did tests on it. There's nothing wrong with the doll. So we now have this quality report or quality control report that we can show to the world." So we can say it's not the company.
Yeah,
it's nothing to do with the company.
I would totally trust them to, basically rate themselves.
Yeah, well, obviously they're a big time corporation. They're not going to do that, but they now have at least this report saying they actually did go through the doll and that there was nothing. He wasn't tampered with by anybody at the company. That this lady and her son's just crazy.
They're just goddamn liars.
Which I thought was a super genius thing. So in the very, very beginning of this movie, we learned that Andy's mom is now in a mental institution. Andy is awarded the state, and you would be like, "How why would they ever refurbish Chucky? It makes no sense." And they come up with a perfect real life excuse of why that they would do that, which is because there's rumors that somebody at the company's fucking with it. Very beginning, like, I think this movie killed it on setting up a good sequel, where they could have easily fucked this up.
So, despite all of this, the CEO is still not happy. So, Matson then takes him into a room and informs him that they were able to recover the doll from the Chicago Police Department and have now inspected and rebuilt him, finding absolutely nothing wrong. The CEO then demands to see the doll, so Matson yells at the two technicians who are working on him, who say that he will be ready in just a moment, as we then see a piece of machinery begin to place a new set of eyes into the empty skull. But right before the eyes go in, the machine gets stuck, causing one of the men to hit it, which causes it to start working again. And right as we see the eyes go into the sockets, a red glow and bolts of electricity shoot up the arm of the machine, electrocuting the main technician, killing him.
This is such, like, a dramatic '80s, like, electrocution,
Yeah,
thrown and
yeah.
flips through a window.
Goes through the
Like,
glass.
in the '80s, the late '80s and early '90s, they had to you remember the first one was like an action horror movie,
Yeah.
so they gotta go all out.
So after that, we then see the CEO tell Matson to make sure to sweep this under the rug and not to let it get out to the media. He then tells him to do whatever he wants with the doll and he storms out to go to a meeting. We then jump to the orphanage where we see Andy playing cards with an older man while two foster parents talk to Andy's caseworker about taking him home. She informs them of Andy's troubled past with the good guy doll, and the wife Joanne seems totally fine with giving him a chance, but her husband Phil isn't so sure he wants to take on Andy and his issues. But after a bit of reassurance from the caseworker and the support of Joanne, Phil agrees and they take Andy to their home to stay for a while. And on the drive there, Phil almost kills them all because he's not paying attention when he's driving, and he almost runs into an 18-wheeler full of Chucky dolls.
Yeah, and this is such a small thing that a lot of people probably wouldn't pay attention to, but I think cinematography-wise, I absolutely loved it, so I had to point it out. We get this great shot of Andy's face, and over his face is the reflection of Chucky drawn on the side of his truck, and it really, like, symbolizes with this movie, like, no matter what Andy does, Chucky's always following him. And you really get that, like, scared look on his face as it's flashing over. I thought, like, from a filming perspective, that shot was set up genius. I don't know why.
Can,
I loved it.
can you imagine Chucky's reaction if he found out, like, Andy died in a car wreck after slamming into a truck full of Chucky dolls?
Yeah, 10,000 other Chucky dolls killed him.
It was very ironic. So Phil, Joanne, and Andy finally arrive at the Simpson residence where Andy quickly discovers that Joanne has the decorating style of an 87-year-old grandmother. And while he's walking around checking out the living room, he sees all these little, like, glass figurine things. He then spots one sitting on an end table of a mother holding a small child, and because Andy misses his mom, he drops to one knee and he goes to touch it. But before he manages to lay a finger on it, Phil and Joanne shout at him that rule number 1 is don't touch the old stuff. Joanne then tells him that all of this stuff is really fragile and this particular piece has been in her family for 3 generations. So obviously this thing is really important to her, which means it's going to be a small plot point later on.
And also on the floor. Like, it's not directly on the floor. It's on, like, a foot-tall pedestal. Like, if this is such an important family memento, why
Yeah.
don't you put it up somewhere?
Another thing here is, much like all kids, Andy says some fucked up shit to Joanne, which he totally doesn't, like, understand that this is going to make her feel bad. But, like, kids do this shit all the time because they're kids. But she's telling him about how her grandmother and her mother passed this glass statue down to her. And Andy says, well, who are you going to pass it to?
Yeah.
Like salt in the wound.
Well, I think that's a natural kid thing.
It is. It's a
and
kid being a kid,
This
man.
her blowing that off is a good way to say not you.
So after this, they send Andy up to his room to unpack, and while walking through this fucking giant hallway, he hears some music playing from another room, and once again, just like all kids his age, just walks right the fuck in, where he discovers there is a teenage girl sitting on her bed smoking a cigarette. So this is another one of our main characters, Kyle, who I really like. She's actually one of my favorite characters in the whole franchise.
Yeah, she's a good character.
So Kyle is another kid that Phil and Joanne are fostering basically until she turns 18, to which she can then go do whatever she wants. And she's not that far from 18, I'm pretty sure. So this should be the last foster house that she lives in, which is good because apparently she's been with like a ton of other families. And Kyle ends up kind of taking Andy under her wing and kind of showing him the ropes of being a kid that no one wants.
Yeah, she is my favorite character in this movie
And she's great.
outside of Andy. She, for some reason, reminds me like she should be in a Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warrior.
Oh, yeah,
she should
yeah,
be
yeah.
in that Dream Warriors group.
Yeah.
Like, she is one of those Dream Warriors.
Yep. So Joanne then takes Andy to his new room, which for a kid's room is pretty fucking big. One thing that's really drove me nuts though is the way they position the bed. It aggravates me to no end.
What's with you in the house?
I don't know. I like symmetry, and so they did that thing where you put the bed in at an angle in a room to be decorative, but you would do that from the corner. They did it from like midway of the wall. It really just looks like somebody bumped into the bed and fucking fucked it up.
We know a lot of cinematographers work with set designers to do these things on purpose.
Oh yeah, this is all on purpose
to give you this uneasy feeling.
Anyway, so Andy is stoked at all the toys he has to play with in this like big wooden chest. And Joanne is like, yo, check out the closet. And when he opens the door, he finds a bunch of other toys when suddenly a skateboard on the top shelf catches his eye. He then stands on his tippy toes to reach it when suddenly a fucking good guy doll that looks exactly like his falls down next to him, causing Andy to have a PTSD moment. He immediately takes off running out of the room, where he runs right into Phil, who is a total asshole about this, forcing Andy to turn around and face it, telling him, listen to me, it's only a doll. I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, this kid seen this doll kill his babysitter, kill his, Chucky killed his former partner in crime in that fucking house explosion. The voodoo guy, he attempted to kill his mom and a cop. Despite whether you as an adult believe his story or not, the point is like Andy believes it. So how are you going to like force this like traumatized kid to just accept that this is just a doll?
Why are all foster dads in movies and a lot of them in real life but in movies, they're always awful? Like, taking in foster kids is a choice. You would think in movies like it was the state randomly selected you, and you're like, God damn it, I gotta take in these fucking kids that aren't mine. Like, every foster dad in the movie acts like that.
It's like this guy just doesn't understand, like, you can't just, especially a kid, can't just get over a traumatic event just because you told them to do that. Like, that's not how it works. So thankfully for Andy, though, Joanne is sympathetic, and she quickly rushes over and grabs the doll, promising to put it away so Andy doesn't have to see it. And when she picks it up, the voice box goes off saying, "Hi, I'm Tommy. I'm your friend to the end." So this tells us that this is a totally normal, non-serial killer good guy doll. There's nothing wrong with this one. So next we jump back on over to Play Pal's Toy Factory, where it is now nighttime, and our favorite spineless executive Matson is carrying Chucky out to the parking lot to his car. This guy's Beamer is full of toys. Like,
he's got a lot of toys.
Why is he driving around with so many goddamn toys?
I don't know, man. He probably gets a lot of fucking toys working at the job he works at.
Yeah, I wouldn't keep him in my car,
I
though.
wouldn't either, but some people like to keep a lot of shit in their car. We know specifically some people like that.
So he throws Chucky in the back seat and drives off, and while he is heading home, we see him dial up a lady friend on his fancy car phone, where he makes plans to meet up with her for some hanky-panky on their week anniversary. I
Yeah,
didn't know
I
that.
didn't get that like a week. What?
Yeah, I thought that people stopped doing that at like 13, like or 14, like a
Yeah,
kid thing.
I would think like maybe they at the minimum they should have put like 6 months or a year. I don't know if it was just to be funny, like
I don't know.
their week anniversary. And he's like, I know what vodka does to you. Of course, I got the bottle.
I've known you for a whole week. I know everything. So once he gets off the phone with her, he then stops at a liquor store to buy a bottle of vodka. And while inside, we see Chucky find Andy's file in Matson's briefcase. He then, using the car phone, calls the orphanage where the social worker Grace answers, and he asks about Andy. At first, she's kind of skeptical until Chucky tells her that he is Andy's uncle, to which she pretty quickly gives in and reveals where Andy is living. Well, you would think that she would, like, no, Andy doesn't have an uncle. Like, if he had an uncle, he'd probably be living with him. And even if she didn't know that, I figured like she would at least need some kind of proof before she just gave out info like that.
Yeah, she must have been like about to get off work and she's like, I don't feel like dealing with
Sick
it.
of these damn kids. So while inside trying to buy this bottle of liquor, Matson suddenly hears his car alarm go off. So he takes off outside where he doesn't see anybody, and he gets back in, he drives off. A few minutes down the road, Chucky pops up, placing a pistol against the side of Matson's head, telling him not to move. Now, Matson thinks that this is just some dude hiding in his backseat attempting to rob him. So he's immediately like, I'll give you my money, my credit cards, like you can take the car, like all that shit. So Chucky then tells him to shut up and just drive, and we see that after a while, they pass by the Simpsons house where Andy is now living. Chucky then makes Matson park the car in a parking lot a few blocks away, where he uses a jump rope to tie Matson's hands behind the seat. So once he is restrained, Matson realizes that his time is almost up, so he then begins begging for his life, even to the point of crying, to which Chucky just laughs. He then squeezes the trigger of the gun, saying, "Bang, you're dead," as a small stream of water shoots out of the gun and onto his face, revealing that he got held up by a fucking toy water gun.
He got held up by a toy using a toy.
Standing on toys.
Who knew in his line of work toys would be the death of him?
Yeah. Chucky then drops that famous laugh of his on us, causing Matson to nervously laugh as well. But when he looks into the rearview mirror, he freezes because he sees that this isn't a man at all, but the damn good guy doll that Andy tried to tell everyone about. Before he gets a chance to really react to this, though, Chucky throws a plastic bag over Matson's head and pulls tight, essentially smothering him to death.
I mean, the death scene, although not gory and there's no practical effects, I love the added detail of him kicking his legs and you can hear the motor revving.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking about it and man, with my hands tied behind my back and somebody suffocating me with the
nightmare.
bag and
Mhm.
just like kicking the pedals that would be awful. I thought like the motor revving as he like kicked his feet and was hitting the pedals was a great added touch.
If you have been listening to this show for a long time, you'll know that plastic bags over the head kills, they freak me out for some reason. And I think it may have come from this movie when I'd seen it as a kid.
Yeah, they said when they did this kill, like they had to tie the animatronic puppet Chucky, they had to tie the hands to the bag to the hands, and they were shooting this with an actual bag, and he was actually like struggling for air.
Oh, no.
So they had to do, they had to do this scene because in order to get the effect of the bag sucking to his face, it had to be legit. So they had to do it in short periods of time so he could get his heir.
Oh, that's
And
awful.
I'm
I
like,
couldn't do it.
yeah,
I couldn't do it.
that sucks.
So after that, we then get the Chucky POV of him running down the street and walking right into Phil and Joanne's front door because apparently they don't lock that shit at night for some reason. So once he gets in there, he ends up face to face with Tommy, the real good guy doll, to which he pretty quickly punches in the face, causing it to land on the floor and repeat like the 3 things he's programmed to say. Fearing that this is going to alert someone upstairs, he then grabs Joanne's glass statue thing and beats the doll repeatedly in the face until they both break. So as much as I love this scene because it's funny, I do have an issue with it because we seen in the beginning that the good guy dolls, they have a metal skull with like the rubber, like latex skin pulled over it. How the fuck does Tommy's face shatter?
Well, maybe he was the first line of good guy dolls.
Oh, so they
and
cheaped out.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
the company this is a whole new run of good guy dolls that they've done since the first movie. So that's the only thing I could think of that makes
Yeah,
sense.
well, I mean, that makes it a little better.
One thing that I didn't pick up on prior, I think it's really symbolic. That statue is a mom holding her son,
Yeah.
and he breaks it, and it's really symbolic of the broken bond of Andy and his mom, that he has now separated them. And not only that, but now he's breaking the bond that his foster mom is trying to make with him by breaking this statue that is so important to her. So very symbolic in 2 different ways.
It's obvious Chucky hates love.
He hates mother-son love. He must have had a mom that was awful to him.
Yeah. So after he pretty much kills the Tommy doll, he then takes him out in the backyard where he digs a small hole under the tree swing and buries him. Because Chucky's plan here is to hide the real good guy doll and take his spot in the house so Andy won't realize that it's really him. By the way, why is Chucky like so fucking stoked to be burying this Tommy doll?
I can shed a little bit of light on that. So they actually named this Tommy doll. Don Mancini named it Tommy based off of Tom Holland.
Yeah, the
Who
original
directed the first one. They butted heads a lot because Tom Holland changed his initial script a lot when he stepped in to direct the movie, and they had a rivalry going at the time. And this was kind of a fuck you to Tom Holland because he didn't get the part to direct this. Now he claims he did and he turned it down. In the documentary they said that he was never offered. So there's some back and forth there. But when he buries it and he makes the comment like, good night, Tommy, or rest in peace, Tommy, whatever, when he starts laughing, that was put in there as throwing shade at Tom Holland.
Wow, that's dark.
But it is also a really dark, cool looking scene. Like outside of all that, just cinematography wise, the shot over top of the grave of Chucky standing there. And one thing I thought was really cool that I never picked up on is he is using a toy good guy shovel that is from the commercials, the good guy commercials from the first movie.
This is also I believe it's the only scene that was played by the same actor that we seen play the burnt version of him in the end of the first one. They used him a lot more in the first one. In the second one, they wanted to focus more on the animatronics, so they only had him do this. Like
Talking about the little man.
Yeah, he only did the one. He did the digging scene.
Well, one big thing they talked about is how much more money they had to put into Chucky. Chucky could not walk in the first one, so every walking scene had to be done by a little person. And this one, the big emphasis was they wanted to make him where he could walk. So it looked more, and they do. That's why they do a lot of shots of his legs taking steps, because they had finally like made this doll able to walk. So that makes sense of why this is one of the few shots he's in.
So the next morning, we see Andy and Kyle sitting at the table eating breakfast when Phil drops the broken pieces of Joanne's beloved statue down in front of them, asking which one of them broke it. They are both pretty surprised about this, considering that they have no idea that Chucky actually did it. So neither one of them ends up admitting to it, prompting Phil to ground both of them. Dude, Andy has been here for one fucking day. Like, literally day 2, he's already grounded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like Butters. Butters, you're grounded.
So after this, we see Andy and Kyle spending some one-on-one time together down in the basement while doing some laundry. And this is where Kyle tells Andy a little bit about all the shitty families she's had to live with over the years. And after talking for a bit, Andy goes to head upstairs, and right as he's opening the basement door, he overhears Phil and Joanne talking about him. And basically, Phil is saying that he isn't really happy with Andy being here. He seems to be a little too troubled for them to handle, and he obviously still isn't over the whole killer doll thing, which would really suck to hear as a kid, especially living in like stranger's house, man.
This whole scene, and it's never hit me before, but this is super sad.
It is
Like,
very sad.
he hears this and he goes and picks up this Chucky doll that he's terrified of because he doesn't want this guy to want to get rid of him.
Yeah.
Like, he overhears this conversation and he's like, oh, I don't want to get sent to another home. So he takes this doll. Every time I watch this movie I'm like, why is he keeping this good guy doll around if he's like petrified of it? And this scene really, psychology-wise, makes sense, and it's really sad.
Yeah. After Phil says this bullshit, Joanne once again comes to Andy's defense, saying that he has been through hell and they just need to give him some time, and she also really likes him. I also feel really bad for Joanne because she's obviously like obsessed about being a mom. And I'm sure being a stay-at-home wife like makes this worse because she's probably bored all day with nothing to really do. So she gets like these foster kids to pretty much fill like both of those voids in her life. But it's kind of sad for her too. Like she's just really wants to be a mom, and for reasons we don't know, she can't. So after Andy hears this, he then goes and grabs Tommy, the good guy doll, and carries it back to the kitchen in order to show Phil and Joanne that he is totally over this killer doll bullshit. Which works because when they see this, they're surprised and happy, and they think Andy must be turning a corner. I do love the callback to the first movie where he checks to see if Tommy has batteries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we then jump to later that night where we see Andy is fast asleep in his bed, and Chucky, who is sitting on the dresser still pretending to be Tommy, realizes it is now time to make his move. Because remember, Chucky needs to get out of the doll's body and into Andy before it's been too long and he can't soul jump or whatever you call it anymore. Like, he will be stuck in this doll's body forever.
Yeah, and the shot of him sitting on Andy's shelf in the dark with the moonlight coming through the window hitting him is the first time you really can tell a major difference between the animatronics and the Chucky here and the Chucky prior, because he starts making these facial expressions when he first sits up, and it's super creepy.
Yeah.
Like, I remember that scene in particular, seeing that as a kid and being like, oh my God.
Yeah, I do have some production notes from Kevin Yeager about all of the animatronic versions, which is pretty interesting. So we then see Andy wake up with his arms and legs tied to the bed and a sock in his mouth to keep him quiet. And this is where Chucky finally reveals himself to Andy again for the second time. And Andy's like, God damn it, I fucking knew I shouldn't have trusted this shit, man. Like, fuck Play Pal toys. Like,
Yeah.
Andy's like, I knew it. I knew it. So Chucky talks a little bit of shit to him, basically telling him, like, I told you we were going to be friends at the end, and I found your bitch ass, and now it's time to play hide the soul. He then places his hand on Andy's forehead and begins the voodoo chant we seen in the first film. But unfortunately for Chucky, he gets interrupted before he can even finish the first sentence as he hears Kyle attempting to break into Andy's window because she said, fuck what Phil said about being grounded, she was going out anyway. I did always think it was kind of weird though, like, why didn't she go through her own window?
I would imagine it's just a way out of the house thing.
I guess
We've lived in a house that it was easier to sneak in one room than the other.
yeah, I guess it would have to be, like, Andy's room's just, like, located where she could climb up on something and
Yeah,
hers isn't.
it's like over the porch or something.
Yeah. So as she is trying to get the window open, Chucky looks down at Andy and says, "This isn't over, you little shit," as he quickly goes back to pretending to just be a toy. So Kyle enters the room where she immediately spots a panicked Andy who is still tied up and has Chucky next to him on the bed. And she's like, "What the fuck are you doing, kid?" She then removes the gag so Andy can talk, but he immediately starts freaking out, which of course alerts Joanne and Phil, who then come running into Andy's room, where the first thing they see is Andy partially tied up and Kyle standing there looking guilty as fuck. So Phil is pissed and he starts yelling at Kyle, accusing her of tying Andy up so she could sneak out. But Andy quickly interrupts, telling them no, it was Chucky who came back to steal his soul. For some reason, Andy's past trauma really strikes a nerve with Phil, because as soon as he hears the name Chucky, he's like, "That's it. I have had it with this Chucky bullshit."
Andy, you're grounded. Go to your
Again.
room.
So he snatches the doll up and he takes off downstairs. Andy quickly takes off after him, attempting to explain that he is telling the truth. But Phil, he just doesn't care. Like, he straight up does not give a shit about anything Andy is saying. As he swings the door open to the basement, he tosses the doll down the bottom of the steps. Once Phil slams the door back shut and goes to take Andy back to his room, we see Chucky sit up where he discovers that the fall busted his nose open. He then wipes the blood with his hand, looks at it, and says, "No, I'm turning human again. If I don't get out of this body soon, I'm screwed."
Phil's a dick, man.
He is an asshole.
He didn't even put him out of the house. Like, just get rid of the doll. If I was in a situation and this kid had been through all this, even if I didn't believe him, I would just put the doll in the trash outside. He throws him in the basement, which just fucking makes no sense. Basements are already creepy enough to kids. And you're gonna throw the doll down there, where he's still in the house, where he still would, in a kid's mind, have access to you. I did notice, now you talked about like high ceilings and stuff. I did notice the basement was really deep.
It's like two stories.
Yeah, so I did get some insight on, I think part of that may have been what you were saying with the everything being massive to a kid, but also they had to have a certain amount of room underneath the steps for the animatronics that ran Chucky for the scene that takes place down there. So that was another part of it.
So yeah, just in case you don't remember from the last film, the longer he stays in the doll body, the more human he becomes, eventually to the point where he could be killed just like a real person could be. So the next morning, we see Andy and Kyle leaving the house to head to the bus stop for school. I just want to say here, there's a little personal note. Joanne steps out to give Andy his bag of lunch. And she's got like her hair down. She's looking real natural. She's got like no makeup on. She's fucking hot, man.
She is a cute,
I think she's hot.
a cute housewife. The lady who plays her actually hated this movie.
Yeah,
had a really bad time. I don't know a whole lot of details, but I know they said that she had an awful time. And apparently the fact that Chucky was like, got most of the attention. And say, for example, instead of, if they would shoot a scene, say 47 times to get Chucky right, and when they got it right, if the actor's fucking scene was awful or they fucked up, they used that scene because Chucky was more important. And she was apparently offended by that.
Yeah, so her big thing was, so there was a lot more character development with Joanne and Phil originally, but some of these scenes that were coming up on with where they really sunk a lot of time into getting the good shots with animatronics, it ended up causing the production to run behind schedule, which the investors got really upset with the director about. And he ended up cutting out a bunch of her scenes, lines, important lines that she really delivered this performance. And this is what her and the actor who played Phil, because I think they're both kind of like stage actors, this really pissed them off.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It seemed very, very kind of snobby. She's cute, but if you take a horror movie slasher role and you are upset that they put more time into getting Chucky right than you're more in it for the individual aspect of it and not so much the movie.
Yeah, I think she's good looking. If I was Phil, man, I'd, before I head off for work, I'd probably take her upstairs, play some Adi Dewey Dembella, put your pussy on this fella. They should use that in Child's Play. It's a good one.
Phil makes her count as ball hairs
So,
with her mouth.
another interesting thing here, Kyle is dressed like Malcolm X.
Did not pay attention to that.
So Andy then gets on the bus while Kyle walks away with her friends, and we see the same scene we always see in movies where we are following the new kid on his first day of school. You already know, like, he gets on the bus, and of course, nobody will let him sit in their seat. Like, they're all being fucking assholes. It's very Forrest Gump. You can't sit here. You can't sit here.
Seats taken.
Seats taken. So he ends up finding an open seat in the very back, and right as the bus drives off, we see Chucky's legs dangling underneath. So obviously, he is unknowingly hitching a ride with Andy to school. So later on, we see Andy just sitting very politely at his desk while his new teacher, Miss Kittlewell, reads a story to the class. After a few moments, the shithead kid behind him decides that it would be a good idea to flick Andy's ear, to which he then turns around and tells him to basically fuck off.
Andy don't play that shit, man.
He's been in fucking foster orphanage now. Like, he's fucking probably hardened.
Been in fights for his life.
That's like
probably worse than foster care.
That's like kid prison. Like, he's done time.
He's fought like a famous murderer.
He's like Get Lost Microchip, which was not a good. I don't know about 1990, but that I don't think that was ever a good diss.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. But that's his way of saying fuck you.
That's how people used to bully Elon Musk when he was a kid. So this catches the attention of the whole class, especially the teacher, Miss Kettlewell, who gets pretty aggravated over this, where she then even calls out Andy in front of everyone, calling him a disruptive student and telling him that he should be more concerned with getting on her good side. Fuck this bit.
Hey, bro, Andy is always getting the shit into the stick. Like, aside from what's about to happen where he gets in trouble, like, he literally just got bullied by a kid, and he gets in trouble for saying something to the kid. And she does not want to hear anything about why he turned around and said something to that kid. She's a total bitch. She's like, you should be kissing my ass right now because you're new.
So I gotta talk about this shit, right? I've always hated this character. Number one, she's definitely like the president of her fucking HOA. She's a total Karen. I want to see the manager, probably always in her neighbor's business. Like, she's a cunt bag. But the main thing I want to talk about is, so we moved around a lot when we were kids, like pretty much different schools every year up until like high school. I have been the new kid many, many times in my life. And I had a teacher just like this bit when I was around Andy's same age. And she also did this same shit to me on my first day. So I have no fucking sympathy for this bitch. I cannot stand her, and I wish Chucky would have killed her with a chainsaw.
Yeah, I ironically did as well in like I believe first or second grade. And her name was Miss Moore, which I think was the same name as the teacher you're talking about. Was it Miss Moore?
I don't remember at this point.
But anyway, yeah, in completely different states. So it's just completely ironic that happened. And yeah, I hope both of those teachers got beat to death with a ruler. Just going to say that. Just going to say that.
Bro, this lady told me that this is my first day. This is the end of my first day. She told me that she knew I was going to be a bad student by the way I stood in her doorway when the counselor brought me in.
Yeah,
And I was like, I was like Andy's age. I was maybe like 8.
Well,
And I'm like, "What?"
you'll remember this. Mine wrote mom a letter that said that I was a master manipulator that played mind
That's
games.
like sick.
Yeah. I'm like, like I was an evil genius or something.
Yeah. Yeah, so fuck Miss Kittlewell. So, after the public berating of a traumatized child in front of the whole class, the bell then rings and all the kids get ready to leave for the day. And right as this is happening, we see Miss Bitchface looking through the worksheets that all the students turned in earlier. When she comes across Andy's, and there's something written in bright red marker over the whole page, and it says, "Fuck you, bitch," which couldn't be more fitting if I wrote it myself. And we know from this quick shot from earlier that Chucky actually did this to get Andy in trouble. And this totally works because right as the kids start leaving the classroom, Miss Bitchface grabs Andy and starts yelling at him. She then forces him to sit down in a chair and basically says that he isn't going home anytime soon. And when Andy protests that he didn't do it, she asks him who did. And of course, he points at the good guy doll on the toy chest. We all know how well that has worked for Andy. So I guess he's basically in detention, and she forces him to put his head down on the desk as she throws Chucky into the closet. She then leaves, locking the fucking door behind her, which I'm pretty sure you can't lock a child in a room by themselves in like a place like that.
You could in 1990. Definitely couldn't now.
Like, what if
that's
there's
like
a
a
fucking
fire hazard.
Yeah, I was about to say, what if an emergency, like a fucking fire or something happens? This little kid's like gonna die, burnt to death.
They didn't care about kids in 1990.
No. So she basically locks Andy in a room with this killer doll who wants to steal his body. Andy then gets up and heads over to the closet. And I guess that he does this because he isn't sure if this is Chucky or just like another good guy doll that just belongs to the school. So he walks over to the closet, and right as he looks into the keyhole, we suddenly see Chucky's eye appear as he yells peekaboo, scaring the shit out of him. And this is probably one of the more famous shots of this movie.
Was it Chucky or was it the Crypt Keeper? We'll never know.
We'll never know, yeah.
We'll never know with the eyes, but I will say, I don't know how they did it, but the eye shot looked really good.
Yeah, it was lit very well. Yeah, because normally you'd have so much shadow. It'd be hard to get that right. So Andy takes off running where he quickly discovers the door is locked. So he then starts opening the window to escape. And thankfully for him, Miss Bitchface also locked the closet door. So Chucky can't get out and go after Andy. You know, like I said, we had talked about this in the last episode. And we talked about it at the beginning of this one, but man, scenes like this where Chucky's fucking raging, dude. Like he's trying to get out of this closet. He's in this rage. That's the fucking Chucky I want to see.
Yeah, I mentioned it later on in the notes, kind of the same thing. So in all 3 of the first movies, he has these like insane rages, and he tries to bite throats out.
Yeah.
Like every time he jumps on somebody and he's literally trying to rip their jugular out with his teeth, like while he's freaking out. It's like this massive amount of like anger issues that obviously Charles Lee Ray had when he was a killer. And we lose that after the first 3.
Yeah, that adds to the whole like, believability of him being this serial killer when he was a person.
And it's
because he can't control this rage.
Fucking horrifying when this small doll is just having this massive rage and has this strength that you wouldn't think it would have. Yeah, unfortunately, after the first 3, we really lose that more and more as things go on.
So after Andy escapes out the window, Miss Bitchface returns from pleasuring herself in the bathroom after getting all horned up from bullying a child. I truly believe that.
Probably right.
And she is pissed when she finds Andy not in his seat. She spots the closet doorknob moving and assumes that he must be in the closet. But when she opens the door, she doesn't see anybody. Do you think John Cena was in there and she just couldn't see him?
I don't think so.
That's a good joke. That was a good one.
I mean, I missed out on a lot of the John Cena stuff. I still don't
I
get the
did
"you don't see me" thing. I just don't understand. I
I
wasn't
don't
watching
I
wrestling.
didn't either, but I've seen it memed so many times and, like, all over the internet that I get it. Like, I
Is
get
it
that joke.
just like you just don't see him?
I I he,
Is it just like
I
his catchphrase or
I
something, and
yeah,
people, like, started making fun of him for the catchphrase?
I don't know. I just know that he said it a lot, he put it on shirts and hats,
That's
and it just
he
became this
tried to
funny
I
thing.
remember he tried to copy G-Unit when G-Unit was
Yeah,
cool with his logo, and see, I always hated him.
yeah.
I do think that you would think this teacher would realize that this couldn't possibly be Andy because she had to unlock the door to get into the closet, and there's probably no way to lock it from the inside.
She's fucking stupid, so fuck her.
She is a stupid bitch. She literally looked past her common sense out of her anger to beat a child.
Interesting thing, though, is in real life, she's a very nice lady, but she's actually, like, best friends with another actress who played Aunt Maggie in the first one. That's actually how she ended up in this movie.
Yeah, she's in that documentary, and
Mhm.
she's, like, the sweetest lady.
Yeah. So she's then like, where the fuck is this kid? And she starts looking around all these toys and stuff when suddenly Chucky pops out and stabs her in the stomach with, I think it's like a bicycle pump. I think it's a pump of some kind.
Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that.
She,
I just wondered, honestly, why is there so many kids' clothes in this closet?
because she fucking kidnaps and murders children,
I
obviously.
think she does.
Yeah, this is obvious. So she fucking freaks out and she's like running out of the closet while yelling in pain. But she doesn't get very far because for some reason she kind of just throws herself on a bunch of these desks. We then get this awesome shot of Chucky walking out of the closet towards her saying, "You've been very naughty, Miss Kittlewell," while holding a fucking good guy's yardstick. So, interesting thing. The whole reason that this shot was put in the film was to showcase how fucking awesome the new Chucky animatronic was.
I was so in my notes here, we get a POV shot of her on the ground and Chucky walking towards her while he's like talking shit and making all these faces. And it looks so because he's got this ruler
Is
in
this when
his
when
hand,
he's hitting the ruler in his
smacking the
hand?
ruler.
Yeah, this is the scene.
That whole shot, the POV is extremely terrifying and done so well. Like I know they wanted to showcase him being able to walk, but not only is he walking, smacking a ruler in his hand, and making all these like angry faces as he's talking shit to her. And it took, I think they said it took like 9 or 10 guys to run him.
There's 9, yeah.
So there was actually like a hole cut in that closet behind that ran all the wires for him. But this was all an actual animatronic happening in
Yeah.
one shot. And she said it wasn't really hard for her to get into character for that because it was horrifying.
Oh, yeah. So this shot, it was extremely important. Like, this is one of the main shots that they really wanted to have in the movie. And it ended up taking a whole entire day to film him walking out of that closet, which set production back. This is the whole reason why those other people's parts got cut. But I think it ended up like taking 2 whole days just to film this scene. But I will say, man, it was well worth it because this is easily one of the not most memorable shots of this movie, but of the whole franchise. This is one of the most recognized scenes.
Yeah, Don Mancini said there was a lot of pressure on him due to scheduling and that it took him 2 days to put this together. And a big part of that was because all the wires bundled together that went to each motor in Chucky had to run through this hole in the closet wall and all had to be hidden and set up right. And then once you get all that and the camera angle right, then you got to get each movement choreography down, like 10 people moving a different part of him. But man, I think it was worth it. And
Yeah.
that's why I said, like, that lady is kind of being, a prude, whiny actress, stage actress, because scenes like this are more important than her dramatic argument and relationship
Yeah.
with Phil. Like, this is a Chucky movie.
I totally agree. So when she sees this basically evil toy walking towards her looking crazy as fuck, she's almost in shock. Like, she can't even bring herself to try to get away. Chucky then starts beating her repeatedly with the stick as the camera angle continues to change until we finally hear Miss Bitchface stop screaming and we get an outside shot of the school where we see it is completely empty. I wonder how long it would take to beat someone to death with a yardstick. Like,
Uh,
I don't even know if you could beat someone to death with a yardstick.
yeah, maybe she was bleeding out from where she got stabbed too, and he was just torturing her as she bled out to die.
I don't
Because she
know.
was such a bitch. He felt bad for Andy. He's like, "I am gonna fuck this bitch up." One thing it's a common thing in all the Child's Plays, but I always love it every single time, is when the people who don't believe Andy the most die, they
Oh,
always get,
yeah.
like, a right before they get to see that Chucky's real, and they get this shock, and hers was kinda drawn out with that
Mhm.
scene, and then him, beating her to death with the yardstick, and the touch that it is a good guy yardstick.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the small things I never noticed in this movie that he's killing people with the good guy toys that came with it was accessories.
Yeah, that's great, man. Because, the whole reason one of the reasons they even made the Child's Play movies was because of some of these toys that kinda took over. And
It's
that's
the
another thing.
consumerism,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's another thing it showcases is, like, I remember back when Power Rangers was popular and literally, like, everything was I remember in school, like, getting the teacher passing out rulers and then being fucking Power Ranger rulers, like, it just shows that when kids want a certain thing so much and toy companies fucking just flood the market with it, you get, shit like good guy rulers and shovels and all this shit.
Well, the original script was to kinda showcase the consumerism of the children's toy industry, and like, Cabbage Patch Kids were
Yeah.
one of the things that they based the character off of, and they wanted to tie that in with kinda the fairy tale of the doll coming to life, but a horror version of it, and, I love that they take these things from the commercial in the first movie, and we get to actually see them in action, and it's so small, I've never noticed it before, but I love that they did that. Great touch.
So when Andy gets home, he tells Phil and Joanne about Chucky following him to school, and to no surprise to anyone, Phil gets pissed. He then takes Andy over to the basement door where he shows him that the good guy doll is still laying in the same spot as the night before. So after Andy gets berated by another adult, he gets sent to his room where he can hear Phil and Joanne arguing about sending him back to the orphanage. This argument is short, but it is a little interesting because Phil says that if Andy stays here, he's going to tear this family apart. And Joanne responds with, "Is this what you call a family?" And it kind of makes me wonder if, like, maybe the reason they can't have children is because of, like, Phil's shitty weak ass balls or something. Like, maybe it's Phil's fault.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So, he said something that stood out to me in that same argument is she says it'll be traumatic for him, and he says, "Traumatic for him or traumatic for you?" And, obviously a kid that's been through all this, like, obviously that would be traumatic for him, but he's a fucking dick and he's seeing right past
Mhm.
that. And then he mentions tearing the family apart. And when she makes that comment, he makes the comment, "He's not our child." Like, he's not. Like, no matter what you do, he's
Yeah.
not our kid. Get over it. And yeah, I think that might be an interesting kind of backstory, and some of that may have gotten cut
Oh, I'm
out,
sure, yeah.
that he is the reason that they can't have kids.
Yeah, because she's basically like, "I have to go out and scrounge together my own kind of family, my own children, and because you can't give me any, and now you're wanting to take them away." Yeah.
And he lets her do it because he can't give her any,
Yeah.
and he hates taking care of these
Yeah,
kids.
because he doesn't seem
And
like
it
like he would be interested in
yeah.
fostering kids at all.
Yeah, it seems like that was definitely the background dynamic, and it may have been in the initial script.
So later that night, after everyone's pretty much went to bed, Andy heads downstairs and grabs one of those electric turkey carvers, which we literally just talked
Yep.
about this in the last episode.
Second week in a row. I wonder if like horror writers got a boner when these first came out in like the late 80s and 90s, like when they first hit the infomercial scene.
I would if
all
I was
these
one.
horror writers were like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, I mean, well, the last movie was 2013,
I
so
know.
we have big space here.
I know, but it's a classic. It's a carver that carves people instead of turkey.
So once he grabs this for a weapon, he then opens the basement door and heads down in search of Chucky. But you can't find him at first. So he's looking all around the basement when suddenly Chucky drops down on top of him, forcing him to the ground and causing him to drop his baby saw. And while Chucky holds him down and attempts to pull a Mike Tyson on him and bite his ear, Phil hears this and decides to head down and see what is going on. Chucky then attempts to strangle Andy from behind with his shirt, but Andy is able to finally reach this little saw thing, cutting Chucky a little on the side of his head, causing him to let go and jump off. And right as this happens, Phil opens the door and he cuts the basement light on, where he immediately spots Andy now standing there alone holding the saw thing. And Phil's like, "Oh shit, put that down, you little bastard."
Here, don't you cut me with that. I'm gonna put it down so I can beat you.
So he then cautiously walks down the stairs while looking very concerned about Andy's state of mind, when out of nowhere, Chucky from below the stairs manages to hook Phil's ankle, causing him to trip. Now, when he does this, he kind of falls into this like shitty wooden railing, breaking it, and just kind of falls over the side. And Chucky still has his foot hooked in the step, and this causes Phil to just kind of hang upside down, almost face to face with Chucky. And when he realizes that this doll really is alive, he kind of just freezes in fear. Chucky then looks at him and smiles as he says, "How's it hanging, Phil?" Right after he drops that hilarious dad joke on us, he then releases the hook, which causes Phil to fall headfirst, snapping his neck and killing him. Thank God, fuck Phil.
Yeah, I hate Phil. I hate this kill. I don't hate it. It's a weak kill.
Yeah.
It is a weak kill, but it's all worth it because we get the iconic line, "How's it hanging, Phil?"
Yeah, it's very
Which is
kind of dad jokey funny, but I love it.
And it's a good example of how we had little bits of Chucky's humor and personality in
Which
this,
I love, yeah.
but he was still really scary.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a Freddy Krueger, when his
Yeah.
personality came out. But they never made Freddy Krueger like fully a joke.
Well, I will say that they did
They
that
got
a lot
close.
with 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
5 is actually, I don't really like Freddy in 5 because he's too funny. And it's the same problem that we have with Chucky now. So as soon as this happens, Chucky runs off and hides somewhere in the basement as Joanne and Kyle run into the basement to discover Phil's dead body, and poor old Andy Barkley standing there holding this saw. So Joanne runs down there and immediately freaks out at the sight of her dead husband's body, and this event totally changes her view of Andy as she screams at him to get away from her. So after all that, we then skip forward a couple hours where we see the police have arrived, Phil's body has been removed from the house, and Joanne has called Grace, the social worker, to take Andy back to the orphanage. As Andy and Kyle say their goodbyes, Andy leaves her with one last bit of information as he informs her that Chucky is still somewhere in the basement and she needs to be careful not to let him get her too. After everyone leaves, she then heads back down where she finds the good guy doll, picks him up, and takes him out to the trash can to throw him away.
Better safe than sorry.
After all of this, Kyle decides that she needs to have a smoke and reflect on the situation, where we then see her sit on the backyard swing and light a cigarette. And unknowingly to her, as she is doing this, she is slowly kicking up the dirt under the swing. And we know that this is where Chucky buried the Tommy doll. After a few minutes of swinging, Kyle sees Tommy's red shoe appear in the dirt below, causing her to jump down and pull the doll out. and this immediately freaks her out because she just threw this thing into the trash can. Upon further investigation of the doll, she realizes that the face has been smashed in, very much unlike the one that she just placed in the garbage can. Kyle pretty quickly realizes that something super weird is going on here, so she then decides to check the trash can again, and upon removing the metal lid, she is shocked to discover that it is now empty.
Imagine how fucking scary it would be in real life in her shoes to pull that fucking trash can lid back and to now realize that this doll's actually alive and killing people.
Oh,
And that
yeah.
everything Andy had said was true.
Yeah, and especially considering, like, somebody was just killed not, like, 2 hours ago
Yeah.
in the house.
And now it's gone and you have no idea where it's at, but it's probably going to be trying to kill you. Like that freeze moment of all that hitting you at once would be horrifying.
As Kyle stands in shock for a moment, she then hears a loud thump from upstairs, causing her to run into the house to check on Joanne. But once she reaches the room, she finds it in total disarray with a very dead Joanne sitting in front of her sewing machine. I think they went a little overboard with Joanne's death makeup here. Supposedly she just died like minutes ago, but she looks like she's been dead like a day. They went a little crazy with that white powder makeup. So after Kyle discovers Joanne's body, Chucky attacks her from behind, causing her to drop the knife that she grabbed from the garage. So they then kind of wrestle around the room for a bit until Kyle hits Chucky with a lamp, causing him to like scurry off and hide. Kyle then attempts to slowly back out of the room when suddenly Chucky trips her and holds her hostage with the knife she dropped. So Chucky doesn't kill Kyle yet. Instead, he makes her drive him in Phil's car to the orphanage in order to find Andy. While on this little road trip, he explains to her that he must find Andy as soon as possible in order to change bodies before it is too late. And we can tell that Chucky is definitely running out of time here because when Kyle gets pulled over for speeding, the cop notices Chucky's nose start to bleed. So after being let go with just a warning, Kyle and Chucky start the car and continue heading towards the orphanage, where we then see Andy being put to bed by Grace. But as soon as she leaves the room, we see Andy jump up out of bed and change into some regular clothes because he's breaking out of this joint before Chucky finds him. Meanwhile, back in the car, Kyle is determined to foil Chucky's plan of kidnapping Andy as we see her buckle her seatbelt and slam on the brakes, launching him out of the windshield and into the road. A now very pissed off Chucky jumps up on the hood and goes to attack Kyle, but she slams her foot on the gas and wrecks the car into a metal pole, throwing him off. She then tries to run him over, but he quickly jumps out of the way, causing her to slam into a chain link fence. She then, like an idiot, gets out of the car to look for him when he suddenly pops up behind her, taking her hostage again. Back at the orphanage, Andy sits in his room waiting for the perfect time to split when suddenly the fire alarm goes off, prompting everyone to start running outside. While heading down the stairs towards the front door, he freezes when he spots Kyle standing there holding Chucky. As Kyle and Andy stand there staring at each other, not saying a word, the silence is broken by Grace when she comes walking down, grabbing Andy by the hand and accusing Kyle of setting off the alarm. Now, a pretty pissed off Grace demands Kyle and Andy come to her office where she begins chewing out Kyle. Kyle tries to tell her that the doll did it, but at this point, she is so tired of hearing about this made-up Chucky bullshit, so she snatches the doll away from Kyle, and as she's looking at it, Chucky says, "It's amazing, isn't it?" as he stabs her with the knife. Now, I don't know what the fuck is up with this next part, but after Chucky stabs her a few times, she drops him on the floor as she, like, falls face first onto a scanner copier machine that just happens to be open and, like, ready to go. We then see the machine start, like, scanning her face as she's actively dying, and the icing on the cake, I guess, is it starts spitting out copies of this on the paper. So, yeah. I don't,
Man,
this
see,
is weird.
Don Mancini said he thought it would be cool to see somebody as they were dying on a copy machine.
I mean,
So that's what he put in
yeah,
there.
but
That was
it's
early
just out of place to
that
me.
was like early weak writing campiness that now that eventually took over this whole franchise.
Well,
Like
she would
small things like that eventually became the entire franchise.
well, she would have to fall on it and then hit scan and then hit print.
Well, I agree. Yeah, it's very weak writing, but they wanted to put it in. They ignored all the realistic aspects of it, so they could have this campy, ridiculous scanning of her face when she dies, because they thought it would be funny, and that is exactly what
Yeah,
the franchise turned into.
yeah.
Every kill being a joke and kind of funny, and Chucky sitting back laughing. He doesn't get those evil rages anymore. He's always just like the evil mastermind that has set this trap for somebody to die in a funny way, and then he says this little one-liner about the death, and that's it.
Yeah, it would have been like I would have been cool with it if it was like Chucky's like holding her head down on it while she's dying and he's like scanning it and printing it and he's like I okay. Okay. That seems like something Chucky would do. But her just magically landing on it out of a coincidence and all this, it's just kind of out of place.
You know, another child's play that I will give credit that I would cover is, the Curse of Chucky. I forgot that's when
Yeah.
they went back. That's
Mhm.
the only movie they went back to this Chucky where it wasn't full of just one-liner kills. He was legitimately scary again. The only downside to that movie is I don't think Kevin Yeager I think that was the first one that he didn't do the dolls. They did
Well,
a lot of, like, CGI work.
it was a lot later down the road, so I could see that.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. This was a very early sign of what the franchise slowly turned into, and it became, "Here, let's add this one little funny death," and they turned that into what's make the whole movies that.
Yeah. So Kyle tries to grab Andy's hand as she's running out of the room, but Chucky slams the door on her, trapping Andy in the office with him. So he then takes Andy hostage with the knife, and they end up escaping out of the window as Kyle continues to try and break down the door. While outside, we see the fire department begin blocking off the street, causing a newspaper truck to stop. And it just so happens that this truck has its back door wide open, allowing Chucky and Andy to hop inside and flee the area. Kyle finally realizes that Andy and Chucky have escaped the building, and as she runs outside, she spots them leaving in the back of the truck, which prompts her to jump back in the car and follow them. Chucky tries to do the ritual in the back of the truck, but quickly gets interrupted by Kyle, who is beeping her horn trying to get the truck driver to pull over. She ends up getting him to stop by basically running him off the road, which just happens to be perfect timing because this goes down right out front of the Play Pals factory. And that is, of course, right where Kyle sees Chucky and Andy running to. So we have now come full circle back to where this movie started, the factory where they make the good guy dolls, which, like I said earlier, in my opinion, it's an amazing place to have a showdown. This is actually one of my favorite showdowns of horror in general.
Yeah, this movie bumped up probably a whole point with this ending. This whole scene and set was fucking amazing. You know, I know they couldn't do this in the first one because of budget constraints, so I'm so glad they went back to this idea of using the factory. I also like we get when he's in the back of the paper van and he's trying to do the
The ritual,
ritual
yeah.
right there, and he gets interrupted, and I love the frustration when he says, "God damn it. Like, I'm in this van, and I still can't get
Yeah.
this shit done." And it's, like, Brad Dourif is an amazing voice actor.
He's good, good actor too. Like,
He's
yeah.
a good actor too, but
His
for
voice
for a
acting is,
voice
yeah.
actor to put that emotion in something that is you haven't seen yet, that you're recording prior to the movie, man, he's really good.
So this factory, like back to the factory, like it doesn't look at all like a real factory. It's kind of what like a kid would think a factory would look like. Like, all the machines, they're all these, like, bright colors, and we see a bunch of, like, weird, cool-looking shapes. It gives off serious, like, 90s Nickelodeon vibes to me. You know another thing it reminded me of is you remember the board game Mousetrap?
Mousetrap.
That's kinda what
Yeah,
this
it's got
factory is.
that yellow and
Oh,
it's
yeah,
very
yeah.
very Mousetrap.
Yep.
I see that. This factory is the main reason I want to get the 4K scan of this movie, because the whole movie's really dark, and then we get to this factory, and it's very 90s, like, kid, like, Nickelodeon, like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
said, Mousetrap. I love this fucking factory, the whole set.
Now, when we get our first look inside this place, we see Andy and Chucky running into, like, the storage area where all the boxed up completed good guy dolls are just, like, waiting to be shipped out, and there's, like, thousands of these yellow good guy boxes. And the way they are stacked is sort of like a maze, which we end up seeing them run through as Kyle chases them. And like you were saying earlier, like, the reason I put this in here is, like, this was on purpose. This is an ode to the Shining scene where Danny is being chased by Jack in the hedge maze, and they actually even recreated some of the shots from The Shining, which is super awesome.
Yeah, they did the POV of going through the maze, and they set it up, like, turn for turn
Mhm.
in a couple of the shots, and it came out awesome.
Yeah, it did.
Awful production layout in real life,
Oh, yeah.
but great for this movie.
So, after running through this maze of boxes, Chucky uses the end of the knife to knock Andy unconscious so he can begin the ritual. Once he has Andy subdued, he then places his hand on his forehead and begins saying those magic words. And just as we have seen many times before, these dark, thick gray clouds roll in over the factory as we start to see flashes of lightning. And just as everything is picking up and it looks like the ritual is about to be completed, it suddenly stops, and a surprised Chucky realizes that he is too late and he is now stuck in the doll's body forever. Andy then wakes up after blood from Chucky's nose starts dripping on his face, and Chucky is fucking pissed. He then grabs the knife, getting ready to kill Andy, when suddenly a bunch of these boxes fall on top of him. We then see that Kyle did this in order to save Andy, and the two of them run off into the factory looking for a way out. And this is actually where we get a bunch of those The Shining shots. So after running through this giant maze of good guy dolls, they end up in this part of the factory where they actually assemble the toys. And this is the area that mainly kind of what we were talking about with the Nickelodeon and the Mousetrap, like this whole production area. That's what this looks like. So they try to climb up this conveyor belt thing, but Andy ends up slipping and falling where he is immediately almost stabbed by Chucky. But Kyle ends up grabbing his hand and pulling him to safety. As Chucky attempts to chase after them, Kyle drops this gate door down onto Chucky's wrist, trapping him in there. After they run off, Chucky realizes that he can't get his hand free and is left with only one other option. He's got to pull his arm as hard as he can, ripping his hand completely off, which we also just talked about on the last episode when we did the Evil Dead. She literally rips her hand off, same thing.
Yeah, him ripping his fucking hand off looked awesome.
It did.
Like, the practical effects to make a doll ripping his hand off look like a legitimate dismemberment is just a testament to how good, like, Kevin Yeager and the crew did on this. Man, awesome.
Well, here's the thing I really love about this, where like in this point of the movie where Chucky's getting injured, is you see the like blood and stuff where he's turning human, but you also see mixes of like plastic and wiring in that, which shows that he is like part human but still part toy.
He's slowly
Yeah.
getting a body,
Yeah.
growing through all these fucking wires and toy shit, and this is to see the arm rip off in the middle of that transformation is really cool.
So Kyle then spots an exit door, but in order to get to it, they must climb to this machine that it basically uses this hydraulic arm to like violently punch the eyeballs into the dolls' heads, which I was like, couldn't they just run around this? Like they had to crawl into it.
They had to crawl into
Like,
it
why is there an exit door if you can't get to it without crawling through, like, a very dangerous piece of machinery?
because they spent a lot of budget money on this machine.
Anyway, they do this, and it ends up, like, messing up the way the machine, like, feeds the dolls into the eye punch station, and, it pretty much, like, jams up the machine, which becomes important in a minute. While this is going on, we get an awesome scene of Chucky using a vise to remove the handle of the knife and jamming the metal end into his bloody stump. So he now has like a 5-inch blade where his hand used to be. So, because this machine gets jammed up, it sends an alert to the one guy who is working the night shift. And he heads down to see what's going on. When he arrives at the eye punching machine, he clears the jam and begins working on it. And of course, in order to fix it, he must climb into the eye punching area, which I think we all knew where this is going the first time we seen it.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. As soon as I seen this maintenance guy and this machine, I knew he was gonna get a new pair of eyes.
Oh, for sure. So Chucky then sneaks up behind him, and as the man turns the machine back on and goes to get up, Chucky slashes the side of his face with the knife, causing him to fall perfectly in place in order for the eye punch to slam 2 big plastic eyeballs into his skull. This is just my opinion, but I will say that I think this kind of looks terrible.
I didn't think it looked terrible. I will say it's another example of what the franchise turned into.
No, I'm not.
They skipped a lot about.
I don't mean the kill. That's not what I mean. I mean when they show the scene with the eyeballs like in his head now.
Oh yeah.
So it looks. Matter of fact, I'm very positive this is what they did. But all they did was like put a bunch of fake blood around his eyes, and then they glued the plastic eyeballs over his eyelids. They didn't really try to make it look like it was in his head. And if you actually pause it, you can see that his eyes are just shut with these things like sitting on top of his eyes. So
Yeah.
I was really disappointed. This would be an fucking awesome kill if that would have looked better.
Yeah, I thought the eyeballs punching in looked good. The after of the kill, not so great, but I'll give them a pass because they do some amazing things with special effects at this part of the movie.
I also love how Chucky is trying to like find and kill Kyle and Andy before they escape the factory, but he just can't resist this easy kill that's close by. Like he totally does a detour just to kill this guy with this machine.
I think he's seen this machine and was like,
I gotta kill
I
somebody.
gotta kill somebody with this thing before I do anything else.
So after this, we see this big machine thing that has like a conveyor belt running through it. And when a doll body goes inside, these doors close and it uses very hot liquid plastic to fuse the arms and legs onto the doll's torso. And this thing's gonna, of course, come into play in a moment. So Andy accidentally bumps into the control panel for this thing, causing it to go in reverse, which causes this doll to go back through. Kyle quickly undoes whatever Andy just did, causing the machine to go back to normal. But when this doll comes back out, we see a ton of burnt and melted arms and legs fused all over its body.
Bro, this super good guy doll is horrifying.
It is. But what may be more horrifying is that something my very immature brain thought about here. So this is the only time we get to see what Chucky looks like naked, is when these dolls are on this assembly line. And the reason I bring this up is because we know in Bride, he fucks Tiffany.
He gets a wiener.
But
because in the seat of Chucky, we see a silhouette, or we see the shadow on the wall of his tiny little wiener.
well, so that's
So
what
he grows a wiener at some point.
That's
when
what
he
I'm getting
turns-
at. Like these dolls don't have private parts here. So Chucky, like, the more time he spends in this body, he grows a dick. He grows a little dick and balls.
Not much of a dick, but he grows one. He sure does.
That's fucking wild. That is some wild voodoo shit. Like you slowly even get like a dick. You know, what's stopping him? Like once he fully turns human just to live as like a little person? He could have a whole new life.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody would hire him.
I mean, I don't know. He could
Be
get a
hard
job
to
doing
make
something.
money.
He could
Go work for the carnival. They'll
That's
take him. They'll take anybody.
Yeah, so this doll that comes out of this machine is fucked up. Like it's nightmare fuel is what it is. So Chucky ends up on this conveyor belt where he tries to slice Kyle with his knife hand, but she manages to avoid it. And she hits the button that causes this like animatronic robot arm to staple his balls to the conveyor belt, trapping him there. Kyle has bested Chucky like over and over again in this movie. And I'm surprised like he didn't say like fuck Andy Barclay and go after like Kyle in the sequels, because she really fucking like this whole time that they've been battling, like most of the time she gets over on him. She gets him.
You know what's shitty too is he goes to kill Andy, and if he only knew about this amulet, it would have saved. There would have been no need for him to keep going after Andy.
Well, I mean, he had the amulet on his body when he got killed, so he did know about it,
but he doesn't know. He reads in The Bride of Chucky in Voodoo for Dummies that he can go into anybody if he has that amulet.
Yeah, I haven't seen that in a while. I didn't know that.
Why he keeps on. Then he just picks who he wants to be in.
Yeah.
And at one point, it's Red Man. So that should tell you where this franchise went. He literally said, Chucky is going to be a bro.
Well,
which is awful.
It stole that from the third one, because he actually he says that for the first time in the third one when he's going to possess that little Tyler kid. But
yeah, but it's Red Man. Tyler was just.
I have wiped that from my memory. I don't remember that at all. So yeah, Chucky's stuck on this thing, and as he tries to get free, we then see Andy hit the reverse button, sending Chucky into that box thing that like fuses arms and legs to the body. Once the animatronic doors close, we begin to hear Chucky screaming in pain and agony as more and more arms and legs are being placed into the box by robot arms, as hot smoke pours from the exhaust vents. Kyle and Andy let this go on for quite some time until Chucky finally goes quiet, prompting Andy to hit the button again and eagerly wait to see what comes out, which I would have done the same thing. I would have to see what this thing was going to spit out. Once the automatic doors open and the smoke clears, we see this awesome looking ball of like melted plastic mixed with blood and human tissue, fake arms and legs, and like Chucky's pants and shoes. It looks so cool, man. I would love to know what happened to this prop. Like, where is this prop at?
Yeah, the pile of steaming doll and dead body is awesome. I literally put in my notes, I would love to own that prop. I wonder where it is.
That's weird. We both put that in our notes.
Yeah, I mean, even a replica of this.
Oh, for sure.
I would keep.
So as this gross-ass bloody plastic mess stops in front of a shocked Kyle and Andy, Kyle says what we are all thinking. Holy shit, we did it. As a very happy Andy looks up at her and smiles. Now relieved that Chucky is finally dead, she then takes Andy's hand and says, let's get out of here. But as they are walking away, the camera pans down to the floor underneath the machine, where we see a large puddle of blood. You know, from what I've seen so far, this big-ass puddle of blood is probably not a huge deal in this particular factory, because it looks like employees of PlayPal Toys are dying all the fucking time here. Just this week alone, we know of 3 employees that have died tragic deaths.
Yeah, their stock's gonna take a hit if this gets out.
So while walking through the factory of death, this big hook thing comes flying out of nowhere, hitting Kyle in the face, knocking her out, and causing her to land conveniently on this conveyor belt, which just happens to lead to that plastic fusing box thing that we just seen mutilate Chucky. Once Andy recovers from his initial shock of seeing Kyle get laid the fuck out, he realizes that this dead worker's body is actually hanging from this hook, just dangling in front of him. Andy then quickly spins around at the sound of squeaky wheels behind him, and when he turns to look, he sees a very rough-looking Chucky who managed to rip his body in half while inside that melting box, escape, and find this little dolly with wheels. So now Chucky's kind of like a guy in a wheelchair.
He is. He is a paraplegic. You
know who he reminds me of here? Do you remember the Misfit toys from Sid's room in Toy Story? And there's the one who's like, he's like the upper half of the fighter pilot and he's like attached to the skateboard.
Yeah.
That's what this reminds me of.
Thought you were going to say Stephen Hawking.
See, so Chucky is furious and he tells Andy he's going to cut his legs off so he can know how it feels. He then takes a swipe at Andy, missing and cutting this rubber air hose, which just starts like flailing around with just like all this air that's shooting out of it. Chucky ends up getting his knife hand stuck in this radiator looking thing, giving Andy a second to think of what to do. He then spots a lever that controls a valve to a big batch of scalding hot liquid plastic that they use to mold the dolls' bodies. Chucky realizes that this nozzle is located right above his head, and there is no way he can move out of the way in time. Andy then confidently pulls the lever, releasing gallons of this hot plastic all over Chucky as he once again screams in agony. After he basically melts Chucky to the floor, he then turns off the liquid and runs to help Kyle right before she is placed inside of this fusing box, which I was thinking, because she's like way bigger than the dolls, those automatic doors would close before like all of her body got inside, meaning like they would have cut her in two,
It,
which would have been awesome.
or they would have had sensors that realized it was blocked up.
Oh, not Play Pal's Death Factory. They don't got no fucking sensors.
The side of those doors are probably sharpened and the knives.
Oh, for
In case
sure.
any dolls get in the way, cut them off, or any factory workers make a mistake. We don't want to have to pay them out in a lawsuit. It's cheaper if they die.
Well, they just get Matson to like cover up every death. So yeah, Andy saves Kyle, and they both head down to look at the absolutely disgusting shape Chucky is in right now. He's just this like skin-colored, melted, bloody, veiny pile of shit like all over the floor. Then, for some stupid-ass reason, Kyle leans down close to take a look at him when he suddenly pops up and tries to attack her with his only remaining weapon he has left. His mouth. But a quick thinking Kyle grabs that cut air hose and jams it into Chucky's mouth, and because he doesn't have any hands anymore, he can't pull it out, and he is forced to let it just like pump tons of compressed air into his body, causing him to start to blow up like a balloon. Chucky's head then gets bigger and bigger until he finally reaches his breaking point and explodes, sending chunks of plastic and blood and guts everywhere, and it's absolutely fucking amazing.
It's the coolest prop on here. I think that melted Chucky when he pops out is absolutely horrifying. That's another prop I would fucking love to have. I wish we would have gotten more of like bloody, like melted almost down to the bone Chucky. Like it's just super, super fucking scary. You think if Chucky would have got that hose out of his mouth right before he blew up, like, 20 years later, he would be on that like My 600-Pound Life show. Like that's kind of what he looks like before he blows up.
Yeah, he does. It looks like a bunch of like extra skin.
It's just like a ball of skin and eyeballs.
He looks like gum. If you chewed gum up and put it on the floor. So after the explosion, Kyle and Andy eagerly wait for the smoke to dissipate to see what is left, and as the air clears, all we see that remains is Chucky's melted plastic-covered body still stuck to the floor. His head is completely gone, and all that is left is a large bloody hole in his neck. Now that Chucky is for sure dead this time, Andy and Kyle finally find an exit door out of the factory of death, and we see them exhaustedly walk outside where it is now morning and the sun has come up. We then get a wide shot of them walking out of the factory with the Play Pals toy sign taking up about half the screen, displaying a large version of the good guy doll waving to passerbys. Andy then asks Kyle where they are going, and she replies home, and Andy then asks where that is, and she says that she has no idea. And that is the end of Child's Play 2. That is a pretty good point, though. Where the fuck are they going to go?
Well,
I have no idea.
Well, for her, she's almost an adult, and it would have been really cool if, like, she would have, went out on her own and kind of taken him. And
I would like to think she probably tried, but they wouldn't let it happen.
Yeah, maybe. We do know eventually, like 10 years from this point, or maybe 8 years, part 3 takes place, and
Yeah.
Andy's life has not been very great.
Yeah. All right, so a couple facts here. Even we covered a lot in the episode. The director, John Lafia, felt that the movie should primarily be shot from a child's perspective, and more specifically from Andy and Chucky's perspectives, as he felt that this is how the world looked to a child, which we kind of talked about already. But many have praised the childlike look of the film as being one of its most effective quality over the years. And I will agree with that. It's a really awesome, unique part of this movie. As far as I know, none of the other Child's Plays or Chucky's have done this.
Yeah, but the factory with the bright colors and stuff just feels so, like, 90s,
Yeah.
man. Like 90s, the bright colors and everything. I think that Don Mancini's words were when he told the guy who built the set for the factory is he wanted, like, an evil, good guy Disneyland,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's
Well,
what the guy built, and it was fucking awesome.
so next we're going to talk about the star of the movie, the Chucky animatronics. So months of prep went into designing the new and improved Chucky animatronics, with 9 puppeteers required to operate them. In order to make Chucky's speech more realistic, his scenes were shot at 18 frames per second instead of the usual 24, which gave the crew more time to sync up the facial movements to the words. After everything was shot, the scenes were then sped up to match the rest of the film. One of the other things, you kind of briefly touched on it earlier, is one of the other things they did with this one that was different from the first one was they actually had Brad Dourif do his voice acting first, and then they would play that, and the animatronics would like live would literally do it that way, because last time they did it the other way and it was a lot harder to kind of deal with. But yeah, that's one of the things different that they did. So they built 3 dolls total, one with a servo motor that could be controlled with a remote control, like out of an RC car. Another one that is completely cable operated, which was the hero doll and was used for shots where Chucky is sitting or his waist up only scenes. And then the third one, which is also a cable operated, and this one was only used for standing shots or like walking shots. And on this doll, the cables are ran down through one leg that is always stationary, while the other one is able to move and make him look like he was walking. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, they do. I think it's in Seed of Chucky, it's the very beginning, they do a kill scene, and then they do, like, the meta thing where
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
making the movie,
Mhm.
but the Chucky doll that they show in that scene is very similar to what this looked like. This
Yeah.
is how it was ran. Like, if you looked at him from the side, you would see all these wires running to puppeteers that are working him.
Yep. So very interesting. Awesome job on them. Disappointed about the eye machine kill, but the animatronic makes up for that and then some. All right, so ratings and kill count. We have a total amount of kills of 8, 9 if you count poor old Tommy. So we had the toy technician in the beginning who was electrocuted, Matson who was suffocated with a plastic bag, Kettlewell was beat to death with a yardstick and stabbed with, I think it's an air pump, Phil who was tripped by Chucky and broke his neck, Joanne who had her throat slit and was strangled by Chucky, the social worker Grace who was stabbed multiple times by Chucky, the factory worker, he had the fake eyes forced into his skull, and Chucky himself, who was melted by scalding hot liquid plastic and had head exploded by an airline.
Too much PSI.
Yep. So my favorite kill was easily Chucky. Like, I don't see how you can not pick that. My close second was Miss Kettlewell because I fucking hate her, and I think that the scene itself was iconic.
Well, I had the same list. Chucky being blown up was the biggest, most awesome effect of the movie. It's literally like plastic blood and body parts being blown into pieces. Looked great. Second, Miss Kettlewell, like you said, the scene's very iconic. I wish we would have got to see her actually getting beat with the ruler. but we do hear her screams, and it is very brutal.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really good.
I wish we could have seen it too. That is one that's actually affected my rating that I'm about to say. So
She actually talks about that kill, that going to the sound stage after the movie was cut and doing her added in screams and stuff. And she jokes around about how like she took herself way too serious then and would upset herself. But yeah, those screams are very guttural. So we have the screams that she did in that set, and then they went in and added some other ones. It's just very brutal.
all right, so film rating, and I'm up first. So I gave this movie a 4.8. I love it, man. I've spent about 2 hours now talking about how much I really like this movie. I think for me, it's hands down, it's the best Chucky to me. I love the first one. The first one's more near and dear to my heart, but I love this one. I can watch this movie repeatedly. I watched it multiple times this week for this episode. Never got tired of it. I love all the stuff they do with it. I love the continuation of the story. I like the characters. Like Kyle is a great character. Andy, who was a real little kid when they kind of did the first one, he's kind of grown up a little now, but he has a very different character in this one than he did the first one. The first one, he's like this innocent boy that's basically constantly having to run to his mom to get protected from Chucky. And in this one, he's kind of jaded now. He's tougher from being in the foster care. And he actually, one scene, goes to kill Chucky himself.
Yeah, he realizes at one point that he gets that little electric knife, and he goes and he realizes that none of these adults will help him. He's realized that, and he's gonna have to fight. Very very different. They do a really good job showing his like trauma and PTSD from the first one. And I got it, man. The kid that plays him,
Yeah.
he did such a good job for a kid, and both of them.
Yeah, I seen an interview with him where he said that even though he was only 7 at the time, he really felt that the pressure for the movie to be successful was on him as a child actor. Like in the
Kind of was.
yeah, it's a big deal. But yeah, man, I only knock it for, I probably would have gave it a 5 if we would have seen the Kettlewell kill and they would have not done that stupid copier kill, which, like I said, I'm not opposed to the copier gag, but it had to be better than that. Oh, and I was disappointed with the effects for the eyes. That was kind of weak to me. So yeah, 4.8 for me.
I gave this movie a 4.3. It's a fun slasher with an actual scary, the best version of Chucky and the whole franchise, 2 and 3. The mechanics of Chucky's what really shines. He's like scary as fuck in this movie. Like the first one, he was scary, but the mechanics are so much better in this movie with the facial expressions and him being able to walk. I just think it is awesome. It's the shining star of this movie for me. The chemistry between Andy and Kyle, I thought was really good.
Yeah, it is.
They talked about this in the documentary, and those two bonded really close. Like she was, older. She was 24 when they shot this, playing a 17-year-old. She was an adult, and she really bonded with him. So they were really close, and they said that helped their scenes a lot. Also, Brad Dourif, like he's obviously
He kills it
he's
every
a
time.
shining star in every one of them. We got some really cool shots cinematography wise. I pointed out a couple of them. The practical effects were fucking awesome, especially at the end factory scenes. The hand rip, the mixed up human and body doll part melts, and then the melted and blown up Chucky all of that was legitimately scary. Overall, I think it's a great sequel to a classic, which is impressive considering that the original was a variation of a classic story that's already been told many times. So for them to have a sequel that, in many people's opinions, outshines the first one, and to come up with that makes sense. I just thought they did a really good job. My biggest knock, and why I can't give it anything higher than a 4.3, everything prior to the factory scene, we don't ever really get to see any good practical effects. Like, they put all the
Yeah.
practical effects in that final act, and that is the part of the movie that's always stood out, and the part of the movie that always has, just since I was a kid, just been special to me. The rest of it, I could give or take. The kills are kinda weak. But yeah, great Child's Play.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. So once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the website, check out the socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or a serial killer possessed doll who is actively trying to take over your body about the show. We hope to see you next time, and you got any last words?
How's it hanging, Phil?
A day do we Dimbella put that pussy on a fella.